Assalamualaikum and very good afternoon, everyone, my respected lecturer and my fellow friends. My name is Muhammad Naim bin Mazlan, and in this presentation, I will present about my case study report, which is the impact of multilingual on children's language development. So, for starters, as our global community becomes more and more interconnected and constantly change, growing up with multiple languages is no longer the exception. In fact, it is becoming the norm in so many countries nowadays. This happens because children are constantly exposed to multiple languages across variety of settings and platforms like their family, their peers, their community, their school, and mainly and especially through social media. So in this presentation, I am going to share a detailed evaluation about how overlapping social context and environmental factors shape the complex linguistic journey. So I will pause for a few moments between sections in order to allow us to absorb the information. So let's begin by looking at the roadway or a map of my presentation today that will explain about what I will cover in this presentation. So let's go. So to guide us through my presentation today, I will divide this presentation into four main areas. The first one is we will look at the case description. In in the case description, I will break down the profile or the child that are being studied in this presentation, the unique distribution of the five languages that the child in our study navigates on a daily basis. The second one is the analysis and discussion. This is where we look at the theoretical frameworks that govern this kind of learning. So we will evaluate his development through the lens of socio-cultural theory and look closely at active linguistic processing behaviors. The third one is I will provide an exploration of diverse needs. In this segment, we are going to focus heavily on the support gaps and resource imbalances between his home, peer, and school environments. And the last one, I will close with highly specific recommendations for educators and parents to ensure that the multilingual growth is balanced with the broader policy implications that affect this kind of learners. So let's go to my presentation. So let's start with the specific subject of our study, which is about a 5.5-year-old boy who lives in Manisa, Turkey. He is actively navigating five different languages in his day-to-day life. So let us break down exactly how those languages are distributed. So for the first language is Turkish. Turkish is the language that he mainly uses when he wants to speak with his parents at home. The second one is Kurdish. Kurdish is used when communicating with his extended family members, especially specifically with his grandparents. The third one is Arabic, which is acquired socially through his interaction with his peers and the community. The fourth one is English, which is picked up informally through digital media like cartoons and songs. And lastly, German, which is his primary institutional language, serving as the main medium of instruction at his school. So his parents actively encourage this massive multilingual exposure because they believe it will provide him with high cognitive and social advantages later in his life. However, balancing proficiency across five different languages is very challenging. We see a common demographic pattern here. His oral skills in Kurdish and Arabic are highly developed due to social use, means that he uses it daily. But his literacy in them is very limited because he lacks the reading and writing resources in those kind of languages. Meanwhile, Turkish and German are his stronger overall because they are reinforced systematically at home, both at home and at school. So this development is uneven and reflects what many multilingual children experience, which is having strong oral proficiency in some languages but weaker literacy in others. In fact, Demographic studies of multilingual children in Turkey confirms these similar patterns. For example, there is a 2021 study conducted by Karanfil and Demir, which examines the refugee siblings raised in English, Turkish, and Arabic environments. And in the study, they found that oral proficiency often develops faster than literacy in minority languages. So this strongly aligns with the child in our study who constantly navigates and use multiple languages across varied home, school, and community contexts. Alright, now let's analyze about how this development actually occurs in the boy. So we can look at this through three overlapping frameworks. And the first one is the language context, the second one is the learner context, and the third one is the learning context. So for the first one, the language context. Language context refers to the varied exposure of the language. So we can see in the study we can see that each language of the boy serves a different domain. For example, the boy used Turkish to communicate with his parents. He used Kurdish to communicate with his family, like his grandparents. And then he uses Arabic for community play, like interacting with his community, with the community around him, and also his friends. He used English that are acquired through informally through social media and like digital entertainment. And lastly, German, mainly used for his academics because German is mainly used in his school. The second one is the learner context. Learner context reflects his specific cognitive stage. So, at the age of 5.5 years old, he is in a critical period for language acquisition, which allows him to absorb these complex phonetic and grammatical structures naturally. And the third one is the learning context, which refers to the contrast between structured school environment and education and unstructured social environments. For example, like the structured school environments is he learns German in his school, and unstructured social environments like when he picks up the English language informally through social media. So this case strongly supports the theory from Lev Vygotsky, which is about the socio-cultural theory, which proves that language growth is not just an isolated cognitive task, but also deeply embedded in social and cultural interactions. So the child's language growth is happening because of his environment. He actively learns Arabic while playing football with his friends, acquires Turkish expressions with his family during family meals, and processes German vocabulary through classroom activities and education. So, to add an international perspective to this, UNESCO guidelines in 2025 heavily emphasize that multilingualism should be recognized as both a cognitive asset and an educational right, underscoring the vital importance of inclusive language policies in schools. So, moving forward into his direct linguistic development, the subject shows a very high level of metalinguistic awareness. He demonstrates code switching between Turkish and German at school and mixes some Kurdish and Arabic in community play. It means like when he is interacting with his community. However, maintaining five distinct grammatical frameworks can cause language interference. For example, the word order of Turkish heavily influences the child's German sentences. He might say Ich hab ein Haus go instead of the correct German sentences, which is Ich hab ein großes Haus. While this is technically considered as a grammatical error, researchers point out that it shows active processing, which means that the child is trying to imply the rules of one's language into the other language. But the primary issue we uncover is not these minor errors, but rather the uneven literacy development. So it shows his oral proficiency in heritage languages is strong, but literacy is severely underdeveloped due to a lack of formal instruction, unlike in his German languages, which he receives a formal education. So there is a research conducted by Go and Yao in 2022, which argues that bilingual and multilingual children often outperform monolingual peers in tasks that requires cognitive flexibility, but they also require structured support to achieve literacy in all languages. To understand on how to help him, we have to explore his diverse needs across his main environments like his home, his schools, and his friends. At home, his parents provide Turkish and English textbooks, but have fewer resources available for Kurdish. He can successfully read simple German storybooks provided by his teacher, but he cannot read Kurdish because they are not physically available in his environment. Through his peers can help him practice German and Arabic. However, researchers emphasize that without active structured support, minority heritage languages like Kurdish risk being lost over time as the child grows older. And there's some scholars like Perez Fernandez point out that translanguaging strategies in classrooms can help children use all their languages together, preventing weaker languages from disappearing. In this case, the parents' positive attitude toward multilingualism helps sustain the exposure, but institutional neglect of Kurdish literacy creates a massive imbalance between his spoken and written capabilities. Alright, now we are going to one of the most important parts of my presentation, which is about the recommendations for educators. So what concrete strategies can educators use to bridge these gaps? First, teachers should adopt a translanguaging pedagogy. So this allows children to draw on all their known languages as resources for learning. For instance, a teacher might encourage a child to explain a math problem in Turkish to ensure comprehension and then write the actual solution down in German. So this practice can validate the child's entire linguistic repertoire. The second one is schools should actively provide multilingual materials, including storybooks, songs, and visual aids in the child's heritage languages. It means that not the schools must not use only one language, but instead the school must use many languages: English, Arabic, Kurdish, and this is this must be done in order to help the child to study better. So this validates the child's culture and prevents heritage languages from being marginalized. And lastly, educators can design a scaffolded activities like group projects, bilingual glossaries, or comparative language tasks. Actively asking a student to compare Turkish and German word order and reduces interference and helps them understand grammar on a much deeper level. Then we have the recommendations for parents and community. So parents and the wider community also have a vital role in sustaining this development. For parents, consistency and structured routines are everything, which means it is very important for the child's development. This includes like reading a Turkish bedtime story one evening and a Kurdish folk tale on the next evening. So this kind of activity builds literacy while reinforcing their cultural identity. Other than that, parents also should view code switching as a normal, positive aspect of communication rather than a deficiency in order to build the child's confidence in using different kind of languages at the same time. On a community level, we also have a community role in this solution recommendation, which in this recommendation I mean. So on a community level, local groups can support this by organizing language clubs or maybe storytelling sessions where the minority languages are celebrated. This gives the child authentic space to practice their literacy and speaking in languages like Kurdish and Arabic that are not taught in the school. So now we will be explaining about the implications for policy. So beyond the classroom and the home, there are broader implications for educational policy. National curriculum frameworks such as Turkey's Early Childhood Education Guidelines and international frameworks like UNESCO's policies emphasize the importance of valuing all languages equally. Policies should ensure that minority languages receive institutional support, including literacy resources and proper teacher training. For the conclusion of my presentation today, this case study shows that multilingualism is highly dynamic and heavily dependent on a child's environment. Factors of language context, learner context, and learning context overlap to create uneven development. While challenges like language interference, which, like I said earlier, that the one trying to imply the students of one language into the other language can and uneven literacy exist. The cognitive, cultural, and social advantages are massive. So, by supporting children through these strategies, we prepare them for lifelong learning and global citizenship. So, that brings me to the end of my presentation. Before I end this video, I want to say thank you very much for your time, your focus, and your attention throughout my presentation today. I would now like to open the floor to any questions or discussions that you might have about this case study.